My girlfriend smirked. I needed a real man. Our friends took her side. I walked away, laughing. Karma didn't need my help, just an audience. This morning, my phone exploded with 32 missed calls. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The indicators were there, spread like breadcrumbs during the final months of our relationship. But after 3 years with someone, you tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. At least, that's what I was telling myself. It began with tiny things. Allison started working late more frequently, which is not uncommon during busy seasons. But then came the new perfume I didn't recognize, clothes I'd never seen before appearing in our wardrobe, and her phone suddenly becoming this hallowed object that was always within arm's reach. I've never been the jealous kind, but something felt strange. When I attempted to hug her from behind while she was texting, she would move away. How she'd walk out to accept calls while stating they were work-related. The frequent girls' nights with folks whose names I had never heard before. Last Tuesday, as I was folding clothes, her phone lit up on the coffee table. A message preview from someone named Jay appeared. I miss you already. Last night, the rest was cut off, but my stomach sank. I didn't want to be the person who snoops through his girlfriend's phone, but the universe appeared to be telling me to wake up. When she arrived home that night, I decided to be direct. She was in the kitchen, preparing a smoothie as if nothing were wrong. The sound of the blender filled our flat as I leaned against the doorframe to watch her. "Who's Jay?" I inquired as she finally switched it off. Her posture changed instantly. Her shoulders stiffened, but then she did something unexpected. She smiled. She smiled coldly and almost triumphantly, rather than her customary warmth. "Wondering when you'd finally catch on, Michael," she remarked, taking a sip from her glass. "Jay's my boss, and yes, I've been sleeping with him for the past 2 months." The nonchalant manner in which she said it felt like a slap. No guilt, no humiliation, only pride. "I needed a real man," she added, smirking. "Someone who knows what he wants and goes for it. Not someone who spends his weekends playing video games with Jacob and watching stupid movies." I stood there, pondering her words. After 3 years together, is this how she truly saw me? Through the shock, I felt something else rise, not rage, but an odd sense of clarity. "Does Chloe know?" I inquired, remembering our mutual buddy who had introduced us. "Oh, she's known for weeks," Allison said, laughing. "Most of our friends know. They understand. Jay can actually provide a future, not just dreams and excuses." That stung harder than the cheating admission. These folks with whom we'd shared birthdays, holidays, and many dinners had all been watching this, most likely laughing behind my back. I took out my phone and entered the group chat with Jacob and Chloe. "Is that true? Did you all know?" Jacob's response arrived swiftly. "Bro, you're fantastic, but Allison deserves someone more experienced. Don't take this personally." Chloe joined in. "We did not mean to hurt you, but perhaps this is the wake-up call you need." I looked up from my phone to see Allison observing me with the same smirk on her lips. She was hoping for an explosion, drama, and a scene she could tell everyone about later. Poor, immature Michael is losing his calm. Instead, I smiled, a genuine smile that appeared to catch her off guard. Without saying anything, I walked to our bedroom, dug out my go bag, which I normally keep prepared for weekend getaways, and grabbed my laptop and keys. Allison was staring at me as I walked back through the kitchen, her smirk weakening slightly. "Where are you going?" she questioned. "Out," I answered simply. "And Allison, keep the apartment. I'm sure Jay can help with the rent." I heard her begin to say something as I closed the door behind me, but I didn't pause to listen. My phone was already vibrating with texts, most likely from our so-called pals attempting to justify themselves. As I drove away, I turned off my phone and felt something unexpected, relief. Sometimes losing everything reveals what you never had in the first place. Update 1. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who responded to my previous post. I never anticipated it to blow up like that. A lot has happened in the last week, and I'm still absorbing it. I've been staying in a modest motel on the outskirts of town. It's not the most glamorous place, but it's clean, and the owner, an older man named Pete, appears to be a nice guy. He even reduced the weekly rent by $20 after hearing my story. I turned on my phone after 2 days of silence, 32 missed calls and 47 text messages. The majority were from Allison, some from Jacob and Chloe, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize. What drew my attention, however, was the social media notification storm. Allison had been busy. Very busy. Her Instagram story depicted a picture that I scarcely recognized. Apparently, I was a controlling, jealous boyfriend who watched her every movement. According to her posts, I emotionally tortured her for years, cut her off from friends, and threw a violent tantrum when she finally stood up for herself. Each post received hundreds of sympathetic responses, including some from people I thought were friends. What about the crown jewel? In a sad video, she claimed I had financially mistreated her by forcing her to divide all of our bills 50-50 while I hoarded my money. Rich, considering she earned more than I did, and insisted on the arrangement herself. Then came a text from Gemma, a coworker I'd known for years. "Hey, you might want to check your email. Something's going around the office about you." Sure enough, there was a company-wide email about creating a safe workplace environment, with a thinly veiled reference to recent troubling activities by specific workers. There were no names stated, but the timing was hardly subtle. I should have become angry. Perhaps I should have pushed back and shared my side of the story. Instead, I was curious, how far would she go? It turns out to be quite far. Yesterday, I went to our local coffee shop, which I assumed would be safe because Allison despised their coffee. Wrong. The barista, who had usually been kind, gave me a look as if I had attached to her shoe. Later, I discovered Allison had become a regular, telling her survival story with everyone who would listen. But this is where things become interesting. While retrieving some things from storage, I ran upon Juliana, Allison's alleged best friend. She appeared uneasy, peering around as if she was worried about being spotted chatting to me. "You need to be careful," she said quietly. "Jay isn't just her boss. His wife, she's connected. Like, really connected. And Allison's been telling her you're unstable. Dangerous, even. Why are you telling me this?" Juliana's gaze flashed around again. "Because this isn't the first time. Before you, there was another guy at work. Allison and Jay, they did the same thing to him. He ended up leaving town. That talk altered everything. I spent the night researching, legal records, social media, whatever I could discover. It turns out the preceding man existed. Mark something. Allison disappeared totally from social media around the time she started at the company. This morning, I received the call from our landlord. Allison attempted to remove my name from the lease, alleging I had abandoned the property. When it didn't work, she informed him that I had been threatening her. He called to warn me. It turned out his sister had gone through something similar years before. But here's the real kicker. During all of this, I received a message request on Instagram from an account I did not recognize. The profile image was of a woman in her 40s, elegantly dressed and wearing costly jewelry. The message was simple: "I believe we should discuss my husband and your girlfriend. Coffee tomorrow." It was signed by Mrs. J. I'm meeting her in an hour. Something tells me Allison's true guy story is going to get a lot more complicated. The weird thing is, watching Allison create this sophisticated web of lies, and seeing our friends take sides based solely on her word, is very liberating. Every hateful message, every phony tear, and every fabricated narrative only reinforces what I already knew. I am not losing anything worth keeping. Update 2. Sorry for the delayed update, the last 2 weeks have been crazy. What about the coffee meetup with Mrs. J? Game changer. It turns out that she's been accumulating evidence for months, not only about Allison and her husband, but about a larger pattern of behavior inside the corporation. Remember how Juliana mentioned the person who had left town? He was not the first. Mrs. J has documented at least 3 similar incidents in the previous 5 years, with young employees becoming connected with her husband and then assisting in the removal of anyone who could expose them. What is the difference this time? Mrs. J had finished playing quietly. She had texts, emails, expense records, and security footage from the workplace parking garage. But she wanted one more thing: public visibility. This is where the yearly corporate party came in. I didn't intend to attend, why would I? Mrs. J had other ideas. Sometimes, she reminded me, the best retribution is simply letting people show their true colors. The party was held at a luxury downtown hotel. I arrived late and dressed nicer than I ever had on these occasions. What were the glances I got when I stepped in? Priceless. Allison almost dropped her drink. Jay's face changed from red to white so quickly that I thought he'd pass out. But here's the best part, I didn't have to do anything. Chloe approached first, obviously tipsy. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she mumbled, loud enough for adjacent groups to hear. "After everything you put Allison through." I just smiled. "Everything I put her through? That's interesting. Tell me more." That was when Gemma walked in. Remember her? My coworker. She'd been quietly gathering her own evidence, screenshots of Allison talking about her escapades in business chat groups, recordings of her discussing how to spin the narrative with Jay. "Actually," Gemma said, "I think we'd all like to hear the real story." The following hour was like watching dominoes fall. Mrs. J arrived precisely on time, tablet in hand. The projector mistakenly began presenting a slideshow of embarrassing messages and photographs. Allison's increasingly desperate attempts to preserve control of her narrative. Jacob, however, put on the real show. Good old brothers come before hoes, except when the hoe can help my career. Jacob. He'd been photographing everything with his phone, intending to present it to Jay later to prove his loyalty or something. Instead, he captured Allison's entire tantrum. "You think you're so clever." She was screaming at me. "You and that bitter old woman, trying to ruin everything I've built. Jay loves me. We're going to have a life together." Mrs. J chose to share the cherry on top. Divorce paperwork. Already filed. It turned out that Jay had promised Allison the same future that he had promised the other employees. Same script, but different actress. What is the best part? Throughout this, I rarely spoke. I just watched years of manipulation and falsehoods unravel in real time. Juliana, who had been quiet throughout the evening, eventually spoke up. "I helped her," she said, addressing the now quiet chamber. "I helped her destroy that other guy's reputation. I can't do it again." By midnight, the party had effectively ended. Allison stormed out, mascara running down her face. Jay was confined in his office with HR. What about those friends who were so willing to trust her stories? They couldn't look me in the eyes as I left. Mrs. J grabbed my arm. "Thank you," she said, "for being the one who didn't run." I drove home to my motel room, feeling surprisingly calm. Pete was still awake, watching late-night television in the office. He took one look at my face and smiled. "Good night." "You could say that." This morning, my phone blew up again, this time in a different tone. Apologies. Explanations. People claim they never truly trusted Allison's stories. I even received a note from Mark, the person who left town. Apparently, he has been following everything via mutual ties. Sometimes, karma doesn't require our assistance. It only requires an audience. Final update. This is it, the final chapter of this drama, and believe me, it has been an incredible ride. You may want to get some popcorn for this one. First and foremost, the fallout from the workplace party was more severe than anyone had anticipated. Within 48 hours, Jay and Allison were asked to quit. But that was only the beginning. Remember the documents Mrs. J had collected? It turns out there was more. Much more. Jay had fabricated all of his expense reports to disguise his business dinners with Allison. Every correspondence in which they planned against fellow colleagues. Each falsified performance review. She gave it all to the board of directors. The company's legal team worked extremely quickly. They were more concerned with the trend of workplace harassment and financial malfeasance than with the affairs themselves. Both Jay and Allison are currently facing civil litigation. But this is where things become interesting. Remember Mark, the guy who skipped town? He came back. And he brought receipts. Literally and figuratively. It turns out he documented everything before he left, including the smear campaign Allison and Jay launched against him. He didn't know what to do with it all. Until now. Mrs. J introduced him to her lawyer. 3 days later, he brought his own complaint. Then something lovely occurred. Other former employees began coming forward, each with their own story in evidence. What began as a single scandal suddenly became an avalanche. Allison attempted to get ahead of it. She uploaded an emotional video in which she claimed to be the true victim, having been duped by Jay and is now being persecuted. That's when Juliana developed the spine. She shared images of their private chats, in which Allison boasted about her escapades and plotted to harm people's reputations. The ones in which she insulted her victims. Allison visited my motel last week. Pete, the owner, called me at work. That girl you told me about. She's making a scene in the parking lot. I took my time driving home. I found her sitting on the hood of my car, mascara streaked, and clutching a manila envelope. I have dirt on everyone, she stated, attempting to sound scary despite her wavering voice. If you don't help me stop this, I'll release it all. I just chuckled. Go ahead. Burn every bridge you have left. See how that works out. She flung the envelope at me. Inside were images, screenshots, and private messages, which she had accumulated over years of influencing others. Her insurance policy. I photographed every single page while she watched. Then I handed it back to her. Release whatever you want. But first, look at where your previous schemes got you. What about folks like Allison? They cannot stand when their weapons are used against them. She ripped up the envelope right there in the parking lot, shouting about how we'd all regret it. Was that a tantrum? Someone recorded it. Within a few hours, it had spread over social media. The ultimate blow occurred yesterday. Mrs. J's divorce was final. And, guess what? She received everything. The house. The autos. Most of their assets. Jay's golden parachute from his company. Gone to pay legal fees. What's his reputation? Destroyed. What are his future professional prospects? Let's just say, Google is no longer his friend. How about Allison? According to what I've heard, she's returning to live with her parents in another state. Her social media has gone dark. Those that sided with her. They are dealing with their own fallout. It turns out that backing the wrong horse has consequences. Jacob attempted to apologize yesterday. I sent him a long note on how he could have been a better friend. I simply responded with a screenshot of his previous messages supporting Allison. He stopped me. Coward. Chloe is also conducting damage control. She is concerned that the screenshots Allison saved may have an impact on her own career. I almost feel bad. Almost. Me. I just signed a lease for a new apartment. I got a promotion at work. It's funny how removing poisonous people improves things. And yes, I'm seeing someone new. Taking it slowly. Doing things correctly. Plotting and scheming are not the best ways to exact revenge. It's living well while allowing people to harm themselves. But I will not lie. It's been really pleasant to watch everything burn. This will be my final update. Thank you for joining along for the ride, Reddit. Remember, karma doesn't need your help. Sometimes you just have to step aside and let folks show their true colors. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.